Good morning. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' deliberation meeting and proceeding 23A-0392EG, the Public Service Company of Colorado Clean Heat Plan. Mr. Mendelson, I think we just finished cost effectiveness, but if you want to take us away, and I just say before we get into it, I'm expecting that this discussion and dialogue will continue into next week. And at least for me, I'd like to understand the rate impact analysis of where we're headed from advisors before we make a final decision. So with that, Mr. Mendelson, you want to take us away? Or actually, let me see, Commissioner Plan, any preliminary remarks before we jump into it?
No, I do not have any preliminary remarks. Thanks.
Commissioner Goen.
No, nothing. Happy Friday.
We'll see. We'll see how happy it is. Mr. Mendelson, take us away.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Mendelson of your advisory staff. I'm joined by Jesse Shula, Dan Greenberg, Michael Eden of your advisory team, and Lindsay Dundas and Wendy Rosati of the Commission Council. Just a few quick preamble, just level set where we are today for anyone who's just joining us. At the 5-1 Commissioners Weekly Meeting, the Commissioners discussed the appropriate makeup and budget for the CHP portfolio for the 24 to 28 timeframe. The Commissioners decided that the portfolio be made up of some combination of DSM, BE, and a limited amount of recovered methane, but would not include hydrogen at this time. The Commission also found that it was in the public interest to design a portfolio that exceeds the statutory cost cap and made numerous decisions related to the proper cost effectiveness analysis for CHP portfolios, as well as decisions related to guidance for the modeling efforts for the next CHP filing. Today, we will discuss the proposals for the company, what the company refers to as Vertical 2 and Vertical 3. At a high level, these proposals are for projects and initiatives the company seeks approval of within the CHP proceeding, but are separate from the portfolio of enumerated clean heat resources used to meet its emission targets. We expect today to get through issues related to income qualified and disproportionately impacted communities, labor, market transformation, and the emissions from the ongoing throughput of gas on the company's distribution system. I'll also prompt a discussion at the end regarding Commissioner Plant's on-bill financing proposal, but will not seek a specific vote on that today. All remaining issues will be taken up at the next week's CWM on May 8th. So we're going to skip the gas forecast and move to section 7 of your decision matrix. And Ms. Shula will start us off with IQDI issues.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. This is Jesse Shula with your Commission Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think you're with advisors, not Commission Council.
I don't know why I just said that. Sorry about that. Good morning, Commissioners. This is Jesse Shula with your Commission Advisory staff.
It's Friday.
Sorry. Yeah, we'll say that. We'll first start with the issues related to disproportionately impacted communities and income qualified customers. First, we'll discuss program spending on disproportionately impacted communities and income qualified customers. Senate Bill 21-264 states that the Commission must maximize greenhouse gas reductions and benefits to customers, with particular attention to residential customers to participate in income qualified programs. Further, the Colorado gas rules, section 4732B4 states that the Commission shall consider whether the utility has demonstrated the investments in the Clean Heat Plan prioritize serving customers participating in income qualified programs in communities historically impacted by air pollution and other energy related pollution. Public Service states that it will allocate 20% of its building electrification and DSM spending to disproportionately impacted communities or income qualified customers. It does not specify which programs or how its programs will be designed to allocate those funds, but interveners generally recommend that the Public Service should spend at least 20% of the incremental gas DSM and building electrification budget on programs that directly benefit income qualified and disproportionately impacted customers. Interveners propose various specifications, including setting 20% spending as the minimum amount to be spent, allowing the company to roll over unused funds earmarked for income qualified or disproportionately impacted community programs to subsequent plan years, directing the company on how to spend its budget, and increasing the budget to be consistent with federal justice body standards. I can pause for discussion or questions or proceed to a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
I'd love to hear a recommendation.
Yeah, go ahead. Ms. Shula, if you want to give us a recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Blind. Advisors recommend clarifying the public service must spend at least 20% of incremental gas DSM and building electrification budget on income qualified and disproportionately impacted community programs that directly benefit income qualified and disproportionately impacted community customers, and the public service can exceed this threshold within the overall budget on an as-needed basis. Advisors recommend that the portion of funds allocated to this budget be spent on delivering actual program benefits as opposed to marketing and operations, which can draw from the overall budget similar to other programs. Further, advisors recommend the public service prioritize interventions to spur adoption in building electrification technologies and DSM, like point of sale rebates, inclusive financing, and encouraging disproportionately impacted customers and income qualified customers to enroll in programs like PIP, demand response, and utility, state, and federal programs as relevant.
Commissioner Plant now.
Thank you. I support all those recommendations. I think we had a really good discussion around the IQ issues in the disproportionately impacted community issues in this proceeding, and I think that all of the items that were articulated by Ms. Shula are a really good effort to try and address some of the barriers that we have in the low income population. I appreciate the detail that the PFB provided with respect to proposed incentive levels. I did think that the $24,000 incentive level for IQ customers was maybe a little bit high. But I think this approach of identifying a percentage, 20% seems, I'm assuming that seems right. I don't know, is a good way to, indicate to the company that we want to have a focus on reducing those barriers for income qualified customers.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ms. Shula. And I think at the onset, I'll say I agree with your recommendation. But to me, this conversation is very much tied, I think, Chair, with our conversation from Wednesday on long-term rate impacts to the system as well, because I think we all realize that the most severe long-term rate impacts would be for those who are already struggling to afford their bills. And so that to me becomes like an integral part of this discussion on IQ and DI is like, how does the future look as this all plays out? And I think it brings up an important question is like, is programming for, and I think probably most especially kind of strategic DSM and electrification targeted at IQ and DI customers, part of the problem or the cure here in what we're going for. And I think you have to kind of take into consideration the whole environment in which we're having this discussion and moving. Clearly, I think this clean heat proceeding is intended to spur quite a bit of action to move towards some of those measures. But there's a whole host of other things kind of going on around us that we can't isolate ourselves from, right? We've had some pretty dramatic gas commodity price spikes that I think have dinged consumers' confidence in the affordability of that fuel moving forward. There are, I think, serious and substantiated health concerns with indoor air quality with regard to combustion of gas. As well as major federal and local incentives too, that all kind of frame this general environment that we're working in. So I think it's very hard at this point in time to understand what amount of BE will become systemic, in terms of baked in and seeing this. And the really major kind of economic issues we're seeing in those long-term rate impacts are the impact of what happens when throughput slows or reverses in direction, right? Especially as we continue to spend on the gas system, which we discussed Wednesday. And all things told, it's a very expensive system to maintain. Even when throughput does not increase, the cost to maintain that system, to keep it safe and reliable, are quite major. And so, given all of that, I tend to see it as more of a cure in terms of insulating, especially lower income customers from these impacts of not only declined throughput on the system through a host of different internal and external reasons, but also those commodity price spikes that we've seen that have been really particularly painful for that segment of customers, which we saw a really blunted impact on those elevated gas costs on the electric system due to the amount of renewables, and especially if you look at the ERP, the amount of storage we'll be adding to the system. So anyway, sorry for the long-windedness, but I think it's important to kind of paint this picture of what are the main concerns, what are we really trying to avoid? And I think the situation we're very much trying to avoid is seeing those long-term rate increases on the gas system, and seeing in particular lower income, more vulnerable customers being unable to kind of front the money to move to electrify their systems. And that's a major concern. I think that has to stay kind of front and center. So I agree with your recommendations, Ms. Chula, but I also see some reinforcement of some form of on-bill financing. I know the company has been focused on tariff on-bill, kind of in particular in the ongoing DSM proceeding. I'm somewhat agnostic in this discussion as to exact design, but we have got to provide, especially our most vulnerable customers, with an accessible, low-cost entry point to be able to make what are major purchases in order to avoid, I think, them being in the worst situation financially in the long term. And that is especially important as we look specifically at this segment that I think are less likely to own their homes. So we have this split incentive between landlord and tenant, which in some cases, a really effective on-bill tariff program can help to bridge that gap in a unique way, where the person who owns or has control over the equipment is not necessarily the person actually paying the monthly bills. And so I think it's essential that we take very seriously developing these tools to provide meaningful access, not just say like, oh, look, see, we spend 20%. We have to make sure these are the most effective targeted programs to ensure we can get as many of these vulnerable customers as possible to avoid, long-term rate impacts that could be really harmful to them. So just wanted to kind of add that color in the entire discussion as we move forward.
Well, I appreciate you broadening the conversation, Commissioner Gilman, and that's the exact set of issues that I'm struggling with, this interrelationship between capital investment, sales reductions, rate impact. And I would just add a little bit more, which is I've been also struggling over the last year or two about the opt-in nature of our income qualified programs. And, as you said, the split incentives is one barrier, but I'm worried that the barriers for the most vulnerable customers are more systemic and, just can make participation really challenging. We've seen data suggesting that a third of the customers may be income qualified, 500,000. So like you say, it's not clear that, the opt-in participation is, helping the people who may need it the most. So I strongly support the on-bill financing. I strongly support ways to get people who need it the most to participate, but it's just a challenge. So I don't know, Commissioner Plant, would you like to weigh back into this discussion anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, no, I appreciate all those comments. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things that I think is been really clear, particularly as it relates to beneficial electrification and any impacts on bills and costs, particularly for low-income customers, is that, you pointed out that it reduces the risk, and I think it does. It reduces, exposure to risk that is driven by fluctuations in gas commodity costs that are then passed on. And but we also, I think that we've also seen in other states that, maximizing the financial benefit of both reducing that risk and moving to beneficial electrification also means a real focus on DSM and a real focus on energy efficiency, that when combined, DSM and BE, you get the greatest financial benefit. And, would really like to see the programs that are offered, and, obviously also the on-bill financing option, so that people can actually afford to do the things that we're trying to incent them to do, that they're combined, and that they, really try and maximize the effectiveness of this kind of investment.
Commissioner Gilman, any further thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly agree. Not only can reduce the cost to the participant, but also to the grid, and reducing kind of those peaking, especially in what might be kind of more aged housing stock and things like that. But I think we do want to be careful to not mandate a certain level of participation in everything, right? Because while that might be perfect and ideal, if people only have a certain amount that they can either spend or borrow, we have to make sure at the end of the day that it's accessible to them, and not kind of make the cart too big for the horse here. But the other thing I'll say that is a relationship that's really interesting, not just from DSM more generally, but also in demand response and demand flexibility with the implementation of beneficial electrification. There's an additional value stream there in being responsive to financial signals, to grid signals, whether that's through a pay-for-performance, demand response, or demand flexibility program, or through a VPP kind of more formally. The marrying of beneficial electrification with highly technically capable internet connectable loads, with the value stream of being able to be responsive for different pay-for-performance, either on your own or through more of a managed program, I think provides a really solid value that we need to focus on, and ideally ensure that those capabilities and kind of the apparatus to support this and communicate with customers is built in from the beginning, as all of this BE is getting deployed. First of all, because it can reduce the cost to individual participants who participate in that, and provide them with an additional value stream, especially income qualified, but it also provides grid benefits at large in a socialized sense by reducing the impact to everyone. So that's another kind of relationship that I think I'd really like to see us emphasize, and be sure that people are getting information on how they access these programs, how they participate in them, and really that we have meaningful programs that they can participate in, because I think that additional value, the jury's out. You see a lot of information. It looks like operational costs of BE, of electrified heating with dual fuel, more or less on parity. It depends what exact study you look at. If you pair that with the potential benefits of pay-for-performance or VPP, like grid responsive programs, there's a clear additional value stream there that can really help those customers in particular.
Well, and I just pull on one of those threads, which is on the electric side. It seems like most of the dollars in invested capital is to meet a very small demand. So, to the extent we can use demand response, managed charging, VPPs to reduce that capital investment in ways that, may not even create a lot of lost revenues, could really create a lot of value. So, anything else, Commissioner Plant, or should we move on?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and yeah, we could talk about this all day, because this is a issue. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Well, and I just highlight one other thing, which is I like that EOC recommendation that IQ customers that participate in the Clean Heat Plan BE program automatically get enrolled in PIP. It just seems like that's a mechanism, just automatically doing that seems helpful. So I don't know, Ms. Shula, Mr. Mendelson, would you like to take us further?
Yes, thank you. I will keep going on this section. So the next discussion point that we will cover is what plan components are necessary to ensure mitigation of rate increases for income qualified customers. So as a preview, Chair Blank, that will get to the EOC recommendation that you just highlighted. The Clean Heat statute states that the Commission may approve or amend and approve a Clean Heat plan with costs greater than the cost cap only if it finds that the plan is in the public interest, costs to customers are reasonable, and the plan includes mitigation of rate increases for income qualified customers. Various interveners brought to the attention of the Commission the adequacy of public services rate mitigation measures. In response, Public Service provided a number of reasons and measures to discuss why its mitigation measures are sufficient. It states that its rates as a whole have a host of mitigation measures for income qualified customers. The company specifically points to the PIP program, the electric affordability program, and the gas affordability program. The company states that participating in these programs would allow participants to not see large increases in their bills because the programs already protect customers from bill increases. Further, Public Service states that its preferred plan balances costs and emissions. It also states that it's using a longer amortization period for recovering beneficial electrification costs than other parties suggested. And it also states that it could direct some specific investments through its Clean Heat Plan into disproportionately impacted community homes to ensure equitable access to programs, as we previously discussed. Interveners provided a few thoughts on rate mitigation strategies for the Commission to consider. Namely, Energy Outreach Colorado recommends that income qualified customers who participate in the Clean Heat Plan income qualified beneficial electrification programs be auto-enrolled in PIP with an opt-out option at the time of their Clean Heat Plan program enrollment or other administratively efficient point in entering an income qualified building electrification program. They recommend that part of the Clean Heat Plan budget for incremental income qualified beneficial electrification should be allocated to the PIP to fund the incremental cost of auto-enrolling these customers who participate in these early Clean Heat Plan income qualified beneficial electrification efforts. Energy Outreach Colorado also states that income qualified customers should only participate in an income qualified clean heat program that offers a whole home weatherization service that provides building envelope upgrades as well as electrifying appliances. Various parties agree with Public Service's position that the longer amortization period is sufficient, although some parties, including staff, do not believe that that proposal qualifies as a rate mitigation strategy. Additionally, various parties suggest that the GIP, the Gas Infrastructure Plan, is an opportunity to mitigate rates by limiting gas system expansion, similar to what Commissioner Gilman was raising in the last point. And various parties state that electrification will, over the long term, reduce costs. So targeted funding to those programs is also a form of rate mitigation. I can pause for discussion or questions or proceed to a recommendation.
Yeah, if you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Thank you. Public Service's plan to rely on existing system-wide rate mitigation interventions to absorb the rate impacts of the Clean Heat Plan should be complemented by the proposal offered by Energy Outreach Colorado to ensure that the statutory directive of ensuring rate mitigation for income qualified customers actually occurs. Advisors recommend adopting EOC's recommendation that income qualified customers who participate in the Clean Heat Plan income qualified beneficial electrification program be auto-enrolled in PIP with an opt-out option at the time of their Clean Heat Plan program enrollment or another administratively efficient point in entering that program. Advisors recognize that the cost of participating in clean heat programs can be mitigated by certain demand-side management interventions like whole home weatherization, complementary demand response programs, and well-placed energy efficiency programs. With that, we recommend that Public Service ensure income qualified customers are aware of utility, state, and federally available opportunities for whole home retrofit options like weatherization, energy efficiency, demand response, and other DSM measures, but we don't recommend requiring that weatherization is a part of Clean Heat Plan program because we want customers to be able to choose what they participate in. Public Service should also allocate a portion of its overall BEDSM program budget towards the PIP, but this should not draw from the previously set 20% allocation to income qualified or disproportionately impacted customer benefits to be additional to that allocation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree with those recommendations. And, while I agree that we shouldn't mandate, the weatherization component, I think we should encourage the company to partner with the federal weatherization program that's run by the Energy Office. There are limitations to that program that, it has to comply with various different federal requirements, some of which can sort of impede some of the things that we would want to have done. So it would need to be a sort of a complement to that. But one of the things about the weatherization program is that it is an enrollment-based program. So it requires people knowing about it, knowing how to enroll, in addition to qualifying at the income levels that are there. So I think a facilitation of enrollment for those customers who may be able to qualify for the federal weatherization program would be a good move for the company to make.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with your recommendations, Ms. Chula, as well as Commissioner Plant's comments there. The other thing I'd suggest and hope we could do in the decision here would be just tie back to some of the conversations going on in 23A-0392EG, which is the ongoing DSM plan, where tariffed on bill or on bill finance, the entire suite is being discussed. Because for me, certainly the company's recommendation here of primarily relying on existing programs like PIP may well be a short-term strategy, but that is not a long-term rate mitigation strategy that is sustainable. And so I think in terms of long-term strategies that are sustainable, we need to be looking to programs like that, really as part of the heart of our IQ programming. And I'd like to just kind of tie back to that. I understand there are some proposals within that proceeding. I think the company's latest proposal is like within 60 days of the conclusion of that proceeding, which would probably be Q3, Q4 this year, to come with a proposal for a financing program, which, I don't have probably comments on here. But I would like us to just tie to that proceeding slightly, in that I see something like that as a crucial part of the ecosystem here.
I likewise support your recommendation, Ms. Shula, and I am also supportive of adding language into our order, tying back to that other case. And we'll just check back with you, Commissioner Plant, if you're all right adding that linking language to our order.
Yes, I am.
All right. Does that conclude this discussion, Ms. Shula?
Yes, that concludes the discussion on the income qualified and disproportionately impacted communities. And just to be sure, this will be circulated as an ABC order. Decision point?
No, I think this is going to be an ABC order.
Okay. Is it okay? Thank you. That's my bad. I didn't know.
You're bouncing back and forth between advisory and council, Ms. Shula.
Still trying to learn the ropes. Okay, well then yes, that comes to the conclusion of this section. And if it works for you all, I'll move us to the labor discussion now.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the Colorado Gas Rules, section 723-4, section B6 states that in approving a plan, the commission shall consider whether the plan provides long-term impacts on Colorado's utility workforce as part of a just transition, including consideration of the labor metrics and benefits as specified in Section 40-3.2-1088 of the Colorado Revised Statutes and defined in Rule 4001H. So the first point to consider is how the company is considering labor issues in its clean heat plan. The company states that they are committed to a just transition, and they propose using the same 5-step process that they used when retiring their coal fleet to implement a low-impact workforce transition. These 5 steps include modeling the impacted workforce, inventorying skills, identifying future opportunities, and crafting a workforce plan, identifying various transition opportunities from future assets, potential contractor insourcing, and natural attrition across all operations business areas. Third, conducting transition conversations with impacted workers, mapping employee aspirations to opportunities, and performing a skills gap analysis. 4, creating and deploying workforce transition resources, including rolling out transition pathways for affected workforce workers and working on executing plans, and then updating the workforce transition plan as necessary with updates to the Commission and key stakeholders. Further, the company states that the newness of the Clean Heat Plan and the extent of the work required to achieve these targets does make it difficult at this time to estimate the total labor impact with certainty. However, they anticipate being able to provide more detailed labor metrics and projected impacts in their next Clean Heat Plan. The company believes that the Clean Heat Plan will create jobs during the next 5 years across the measures in the portfolio, and that it will support existing utility workers in Colorado and create new jobs for electrification, construction workers, and home energy technicians. Specifically, intervening party Local 270 has concerns about the lack of information about workforce impacts for each portfolio. It proposes 2 options for the Commission's consideration. First, it suggests that the PUC hosts a separate public hearing for the company to present to the public both the labor impacts and benefits of its portfolio as required by the Commission's rules and the mechanics of the 5-step process. And second, or recommends that Public Service establishes a working group comprised of labor unions, contractors, or other interested parties, and that the appropriate company representatives establish a baseline of the number of construction workers employed on the company's gas system and the labor metrics to that workforce as defined by Rule 4001H. Support the implementation of the company's 5-step process and develop a model to quantify job losses and benefits, and then share best practices for future solicitation of competitive clean heat resources that satisfy statutory labor standards in the Commission's rules. They believe these interventions are necessary given the significant changes that will come with this Clean Heat Plan. I can pause for discussion or questions or proceed to recommendation.
And if you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Advisors recommend that Public Service partner with Local 270 and other relevant stakeholders to establish, scope, and create a working group consisting of labor unions, contractors, and other interested parties. We further recommend that this working group should establish a baseline of the number of workers employed by the company's gas system and labor metrics for that workforce, refine the company's 5-step process to specifically reach objectives of increasing family-sustaining jobs in alternative fuels and in beneficial electrification and DSM, develop a model to quantify job losses and creations as a result of the Clean Heat Plan, and share best practices for ensuring future competitive solicitations for clean heat resources that satisfy statutory labor standards in the Commission's rules. That concludes my recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Thanks. Yeah, I support the advisor recommendation. One additional thing that I'd like to see as they're looking at that is the number of jobs that are actually people who live in Colorado, because the gas industry is notoriously it moves around a lot, and people will travel from one job site to another, and so knowing which one of how much of that job market that's impacted is a transient job market as opposed to an embedded job market, I think would be important component in that. I'd also like and maybe this comes through the 5-step process that the company has outlined in the transition plan, which I think is a really good one. But identifying the needs of an expanded BE and DSM industry that would be spurred by this proceeding, and promoting training and expansion of resources that'll likely be critical to achieving deployment objectives, and also instructing the company to maintain a list of contractors throughout their service territory and facilitate the simplified process for those customers to connect with, for those contractors to connect with the customers. And I think that's going to really require a focused effort by the company. I think they've done some initial work on this and maintaining sort of a list of contractors that have processed rebates. But I think, you know, being a more active participant in expanding the capabilities of service provision throughout the service territory, I think is going to be an important component of this.
Commissioner Gilman, the recommendation and as modified and expanded by Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree with everything thus far. I have two relatively minor kind of modifications or additions for you, Ms. Julia, to your first suggestions. I think it was your, I don't know, a couple points in, you had develop a model to quantify job losses and creations as a result of the Clean Heat Plan. I would just add by category to that. I think they're going to have to do those calculations from the ground up. It would be a total shame if the information that came out of the process was then obscured. So it should be presented by category so we can actually understand the areas in which the job loss or creation is occurring. The other thing I would add, which I know, you know, is kind of I'm trying to think of the exact interaction of this working group with that, but it would certainly be helpful to see a better developed evaluation of opportunities that include pipes, like ground source heat pump or networked ground source options, which really can help stabilize within an existing category job retention. And, you know, understandably, some of the ground source options are more expensive up front. But I think that's in part, you know, a training and job transition kind of issue to ensure that the workforce we already have that works in pipe fitting can cleanly transition to some of those other opportunities. But that has to be paired with really, you know, the company's enhanced evaluation of those opportunities. But I think it has a unique, it has other unique benefits, which we'll talk about probably later in upcoming sections, given some of the suggestions. But one of the unique benefits is fairly direct transferability of skills from existing pipe fitters. And so that seems to me an important part of the jobs discussion.
Commissioner Plant, are you okay with the two requested modifications from Commissioner Gilman?
I am. You know, I just realized that I had one more thing that I had on the next page I wanted to mention, and you know, this is sort of an ongoing thing, and I'm not sure where the State Energy Office is on this, but I would encourage the Excel to work with the State Energy Office on an application to the DOE TREC program, which is Training for Residential Energy Contractors program, for a grant to assist with workforce expansion and training. I think right now there's a letter of intent deadline is May 9th. So that would be, you know, before this decision comes out. And, you know, if there is a letter of intent that's submitted by CEO, then we would qualify for, you know, then moving forward with an application, which I think the deadline is in July. So I recognize that we're kind of straddling this period here, but if there is an effort to move forward with an application from the State Energy Office, I'd encourage Excel to work with the Energy Office in that kind of an application.
And I'm supportive of both of Commissioner Gilman's requests and also support Commissioner Plant's addition of asking the company to work with the State Energy Office. Would you support that as well, Commissioner Gilman?
Absolutely. I mean, just frankly, these things are hard to track. There's so much going on, especially with federal programming right now. But I mean, I'm certainly hoping they're hearing loud and clear. Like, there are concerns with long-term rate impact, which I think is somewhat systemic, just given where we are, no matter what. And any opportunity for outside investment to help bolster these programs and success and mitigate the cost of the programs is 100% necessary, and to build the workforce necessary to deliver on them.
Absolutely. Ms. Shula, keep going on labor.
One final labor issue, and I think a lot of it was just covered by the discussion that you had, so we should be able to move through this section. But the final decision point is determining what guidance the commission would provide to ensure there is a sufficient workforce to execute the significant investment in DE and DSM and other technologies that will occur as a result of this plan. The company states that it cannot ensure there's sufficient skilled contractors to deliver the electrification measures at scale. And they also state that a portion of customer premiums may be used to fund RNG program labor costs, amongst other costs. The company also states that they've been offering contractor education and training since they rolled out BE incentives in 2021. And the ground source heat pumps may provide work opportunities for existing gas workers like the pipe fitters. So advisors also heard from interveners that argue that a lack of contractor comprehension or motivation may be a barrier to heat pump expansion, as well as a barrier to expansion of numerous other technologies that will show up in the plan. And that while the number of contractors participating in these types of technologies has been increasing, there hasn't been local targeting to increase contractor comprehension to ensure expertise across different parts of the state. So I think I've already heard a number of recommendations from you all, but want to pause if there's other recommendations or discussion, and then this will summarize what I'd heard.
Anything you'd add, Commissioner Plant?
Nothing I'd add to what we've already discussed. Thanks.
Commissioner Gilman?
Nothing additional right now.
All right, me neither. Ms. Sheila, anything
Great.
else?
Nope, I think that covers it. So that is all I have for labor today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Greenberg, market transformation portfolio, vertical 2.
Yeah, good morning, commissioners. Public Service proposed a market transformation portfolio, or MTP, to complement the approved CHP with the goals of stimulating markets for emission reduction tools and advancing understanding of proposed emission reduction options. The MTP comprises 8 market transformation initiatives intended to provide early insights into how to overcome market barriers and transform the market to gain emission reductions at the scale needed to achieve the clean heat targets. The company proposes a total budget of $52.4 million for these initiatives across the 5 years of the CHP. The MTP also includes an innovation fund to support additional market innovation concepts, most of which are studies. The company proposes an annual budget of $2.5 million for the innovation fund, or a total of $12.5 million through 2028. The company asks the Commission to approve the proposed MTP in full. It argues that each component is, quote, critical to providing early stage support across the range of available emissions reduction options to help develop as many cost-effective tools as possible, and that these developments will not happen if the company and its project partners don't have funding to try them. Various parties express support for or opposition to each of the initiatives and concepts presented as part of the MTP. At a high level, staff and the UCA note that the MTP is not required by statute and that the company does not intend to count any MTP-related emission reduction towards its CHP goals. So they recommend that the Commission approve only projects with clean heat resources that are closer to realization and reject all innovation fund concepts. Staff argues that any funding approved for the MTP should be excluded from recovery through the CHP riders, but should instead be deferred without carrying costs and presented in a future rate case. NRDC, Sierra Club, SWEEP, and WRA jointly contend that the Commission should approve only those MTP initiatives that focus on eligible clean heat resources. COSA-SIA argues that given the magnitude of customer expenses at issue in the case, the Commission should focus ratepayer investment on proven customer-cited emission reduction measures, It therefore urges the Commission to reject the $65 million in spending on, quote, unproven MTP measures. The City and County of Denver urges the Commission to approve only those MTP projects that would reduce long-term reliance on the fossil gas system. And for its part, Colorado Decarbonization Coalition, or CDC, supports the MTP as a whole, emphasizing that the research and development it proposes can serve as a hedge against the significant uncertainties that are inherent in any approved CHP, potentially diversifying clean heat resources and demonstrating new and emerging technologies. Finally, CEO recommends that in considering approval of the MTP initiatives and concepts, the Commission should focus on whether each has the potential to reduce emissions, has the potential to be a clean heat resource, is a prudent use of ratepayer funds, and is truly exploring a novel technology or program approach. CEO recommends that if the proposed initiative or concept fails to meet any of the first three of those criteria, Public Service may seek cost recovery, but not through the riders used to recover CHP or market transformation costs. CEO recommends that the company be allowed to include verifiable emission reductions resulting from its MTP projects once they are verified through a third-party evaluation firm and filed in advance of the company's next CHP. There are individual decision points for each of the market transformation initiatives and innovation fund concepts, most of which are brief and straightforward. But before moving to those, there are three overarching decision points. The first of these is, should the Commission approve the full MTP budget as proposed by the company, reject the MTP in full as urged by COSACIA, or adopt the CEO framework for approving some subset of the proposed projects? I can pause here for your conversation or proceed to a recommendation.
No, let's, well, thank you for an incisive presentation of that, Mr. Greenberg. Greatly appreciated. I mean, for me, I'd like to go through, well, first, I support the CEO framework as a useful way of thinking about it. And I wouldn't accept or reject it. I'd go through each of them one by one as I have different reactions depending on the specific effort. So that would be my proposal. Commissioner Plant, how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, no, I'm in the same place really. I thought CEO came forward with a really good proposal for evaluation. I think and I agree, you know, going through the whatever was it, 8 different proposed projects, I think would be a good thing to do. But I'd note that I think the company says that that would be just sort of the beginning, and that there would be other potential projects in addition, and that any additional projects would need to, you know, adhere to that CEO framework that you reference, Mr. Chairman, and go through a review process.
Could I just interject and clarify that the additional projects would come up under the innovation fund? I believe for the market transformation initiatives, those are the fixed set for the CHP.
Okay, that's separate then. All right, gotcha.
Commissioner Goen.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I generally agree with you all. I think CEO puts forth the most reasonable framework by which to view these. I would perhaps add one more. I'm not 100% sure if we'll be able to use it right now as a kind of screening criteria, but a wish list and responses to some issues we've seen in the past. An additional point on something I think we should be looking for these intended demonstration projects is to have a clear set of objectives that are articulated before the start of each project, and robust reporting to understand program design, outreach, and results. After all, if the ask here is for us to spend ratepayer money on demonstration projects, it's important that the outcomes of those be clearly communicated, be accessible to stakeholders and the Commission, and that we actually be able to learn from and scale from those projects. That's the exact point. So given some of the difficulties we've seen in some projects in the past, I think it's important to articulate that these should be supported by very clear objectives and reporting to understand where we actually got in the objectives, a clear timeline of what the project is going to run. Otherwise, I think we end up years down the line wondering where our data was that we paid for on a project we thought was going to give us a demonstration of something. There are multiple. So I would just add that as a criteria that I would like to see for the kind of entire market transformation and innovation suite going forward. Just very necessary protection to ensure that ratepayer funds actually end in usable data.
So we have the CEO framework in front of us as modified by Commissioner Gilman's accountability, reporting, and transparency requirements. Commissioner Plant, I assume you're supportive of accountability, transparency.
I'm opposed to accountability in all cases. No, yes, I agree. Thank you.
As do I. So I think that skips us down to the first program, Mr. Greenberg.
Okay. So you're are you also then agreeing to that the CEO points that any third-party verified emission reductions via clean heat resources, that those could be counted towards the utility towards Excel's goals, and also that costs related to those projects with verified savings, that those could be collected through the clean heat riders?
Yes, that is my understanding, but I will confirm it with a formal vote. Commissioner Plant, is that consistent with your understanding?
So I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. Greenberg, but did the CEO proposal was to allow the company to seek cost recovery, but not through the riders? Is that?
Well, I think the proposal was that it be allowed in cases where the initiatives provide emission reductions via defined clean heat resources.
Okay.
And that those reductions are verified by a third party.
Right. Okay. Yes, I agree with that.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I mean, I think given the CEO kind of framework caveats that these would necessarily be eligible clean heat resources, helps provide me comfort in this. And since these are kind of more emerging or market transformation areas, they may not necessarily show up quite as cost effective or in the same kind of sense as kind of the competitive things that were already modeled. So I think it's appropriate that they could be counted if they're since they would have to be clean heat resources.
I agree as well.
Great. Then I will move on to the initiatives themselves. As I noted earlier, the MTP comprises a set of 8 market transformation initiatives and 8 market innovation fund concepts. The market transformation initiatives are: 1, the all-electric new residential construction project; 2, the neighborhood residential electrification retrofit project; 3, the Boulder Pearl Street project non-pipeline alternative, or NPA; 4, the F3, that's the Aurora F3 reinforcement NPA; 5, the coal bed methane project; 6, the advanced mobile leak detection project; 7, certified natural gas pilot; and 8, the hydrogen blending demonstration project. I'll present brief descriptions, party positions, and decision points for each of these before moving on to the innovation fund concepts. So starting with the all-electric new residential construction initiative. This project seeks to better define the market, customer, and supply chain barriers to the widespread deployment of all-electric new construction and the solutions to address those barriers. It would target a group of 50 to 100 homes, focusing primarily on market rate homes, but will look for opportunities to partner with new income qualified new construction. The company proposes a budget of $5 million for this initiative. This initiative garnered the support of numerous parties and opposition from none other than UCA and COSACIA's blanket opposition to the MTP. CEO recommends that any verified savings be counted towards the emission reduction targets and that costs be recoverable via the CHP riders. CREST and PSR advocate the use of ground source heat pumps for large buildings, new housing developments, and new districts. So the first, I think, of two decision points here is, should this project be approved? And if so, should its verified savings, I think we've already, should its verified savings be included toward clean heat goals, and should costs be recovered via the CHP riders?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this one first, if it's all right. Thank you. For me, this is a market transformation and initiative designed to better define market, customer, and supply chain barriers to widespread deployment of all electric new construction. So totally support it as being valuable, but it shouldn't impede the aggressive implementation of all electric new construction, especially for whole neighborhoods where gas infrastructure investment may be avoided and peak design day demand be lowered compared to what it otherwise would be. In a prior decision, we've already determined that all electric construction, new construction is, and I'm quoting now, the low-hanging fruit for electrification and far more cost-effective than retrofitting gas equipment with electrification technologies at a later date. And that the company is already offering $10,000 per all-electric home. As I understand it, the approach taken by the all-electric project is designed to target a single neighborhood electrification. In my mind, that seems too limited given our numerous prior findings regarding the benefits of all-electric new construction. So I'd like to require that the company start targeting multiple whole neighborhood all-electric construction opportunities as part of this initial pilot phase. And I don't know what the right number is, maybe 500 plus homes per year, and bring the results to us through the 2026 check-in process. Given that our decision about how to best implement these program design elements is still to come, the company and any relevant stakeholders that engage on program design based on this decision should consider additional and potentially larger incentives for all electric neighborhoods of 50 or 100 plus homes in order to stimulate the market during this critical transition period. Such funds might come from the BE program approved in the Clean Heat Plan, with more funds to be made available through the 2026 check-in progress based on progress and adoption and further evaluation of the gas infrastructure mitigation benefits. So I guess I just say that for me, this is the one program that can really avoid new capital. So I'd like to go further and maybe significantly further than what's in front of us, because, you know, as we struggle with this trade-off, you mentioned, you know, a few minutes ago about how we manage rate impacts. This is the one program where you can reduce throughput and also reduce capital costs. So I'd just like to highlight and really require the company to do more. So Commissioner Plan, and again, we don't have to necessarily fully decide this today. We can come back next Wednesday and talk about it further. But I'd like to see this, you know, increase by factor 5 or more, because I think this is the one really win-win opportunity, and everything we've seen in our prior orders suggests that this is the most cost-effective thing to do, and this just doesn't seem appropriate to limit our investment and efforts to a pilot. So, Commissioner Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, I appreciate your thinking on this. And I do agree with you. I think that this is an incredible opportunity on a number of levels. And I think you've really identified some of the big ones. And I would support that proposal. I don't know what it ends up, you know, what the impact on our
We'll have to put it all together and see where we're at.
Yeah, we can figure that out next week, I guess. And so, yeah, I support that program with the modifications that have been proposed by the by the chairman, and also encourage, I think it was Chris that brought this up, encourage the network geothermal and district thermal systems that may offer promising programmatic guidance, both in the next CHP or in a flex review period in a couple of years. I think that that's a real opportunity that that we should be pursuing through this process. And I'll bring this up in the neighborhood retrofit program as well. But I think that one of the things that this all electrification effort provides us with is a unique opportunity to partner with the ongoing VPP efforts of the company to evaluate the capabilities to manage high electrification loads in a concentrated area, to accommodate any sort of capacity constraints and manage those demand resources and address those constraints that might be at the transformer and feeder level. And so I think this really gives us, these projects give us a real opportunity to try and test out that next generation of VPP implementation that would really be focused on the distribution system and maximizing the efficiency of how that distribution system operates. So I would encourage the company to sort of try and meld these projects that give us that opportunity to test those projects.
And before turning it over to Commissioner Gilman, I'm going to clarify or highlight one word you mentioned. The word for ground source heat pumps was encourage, not require. Is that correct?
Yes, encourage.
All right. So, Commissioner Gilman, I think we have the base recommendation. We have my suggestion to expand perhaps significantly the dollars, encourage the ground source heat pumps, and Commissioner Plant's last proposal. So take it anywhere you'd like to go.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think this is, all told, this is an exciting market transformation opportunity. And given that, most of the studies I've seen don't necessarily relate to an increased construction cost. Many refer to a lower upfront construction cost. I think market transformation is the right word for this. I think we need some oomph. We need to spur a different thinking, different training, kind of all the trades going into these new homes. And I think this could become fairly systemic after that, given some of the benefits there. So I agree with everything you said, Chairman. I think we've clearly identified this to be the low-hanging fruit in the future, and really, in a way, a way to save considerable money later, and not doing a retrofit and not building out the gas infrastructure go there. And I do tend to agree with you that really one geographically confined pilot would be pretty limited in the scope of what it would actually teach us, how many builders and contractors it would be reaching, especially if the concept here is to go for like a production builder. You're really only getting the insights and getting that two-way, them providing you information, you providing them with information. That's happening with one builder and probably one mechanical subcontractor. And that does not appear to transform a market, right? And I know this is one project, but in order to understand, if part of the idea is let's understand what the market needs to make this happen for new construction, I think it's quite necessary to have the views and have that interaction with more than just one builder in one neighborhood one time for one project. So I tend to agree with you. I think it would be ideal to see multiple of these kind of projects run, so we can see it run in different geographic areas with different project teams, and really begin to understand more the ecosystem of building rather than just the thoughts of kind of one project team. So I'm supportive of that idea, certainly, because you'll encounter pretty different availability issues and the very things they hope to learn about as you move to different geographic areas. So I think that really will provide the richest information to continue to move forward with this. What was Commissioner Plant's What was your addition?
The incorporating or with the VPP
Oh,
program.
yeah. Yeah, VPP, yes, of course. But also, I think it's a little tough. I mean, given the lack of experience with VPP and more like residential scale demand response in total, you might see the infrastructure built out in total, even though some of it could have been avoided, because I think we'll see the company saying they don't have the evidence to know that they can't build it out in total. But it's a learning experience. Oh, your other point on ground source, I totally agree. Some of these, whether they're greenfield or brownfield or whatever, but when you're building an entire development on one site, really present some of the richest opportunities for ground source, especially with a network ground source option, if there's some multi-use or something, which I get that this is tend to target only at residential. But those systems tend to thrive with mixed use, so you can get kind of a diversity of loads included there. But those really provide kind of the richest opportunity here. And, I talked about the job benefits previously in terms of transferability to the trades that might be more impacted by fewer pipeline projects. But also, I think it's important to realize, across each of these proceedings that we've been doing, the company and others have expressed significant concern about the cost to build out, let's say, the electric infrastructure to hit an electric resistance peak, which is more or less double the typical draw of the equipment when you switch to electric resistance, if that's the backup. Not to say, I mean, we're seeing the technology move pretty quickly here. Will we get to a place in a number of years where there is no backup? I'm not certain, but as of right now, the choice appears to be with an air source heat pump, either electric resistance backup, which has, some concerning impacts when you add it all up, if you don't achieve some good kind of diversity and demand response associated with some concerning build out of the electric grid. But same to say on the gas backup concept, the concept there is that the throughput would decline considerably, and we would essentially only have use on that system during the peak times. Everyone would be peaking it at the same time, so we're not really ever saving on the capacity investments having to do with the system, but have very little throughput to sustain those costs. So to that regard, ground source, and I appreciate Cross for bringing it up. Ground source presents a really unique opportunity to avoid kind of the worst of either of those situations in terms of if you're peaking either on the electric or the gas system, whereas you don't need backup and your efficiency is not dramatically harmed by, extreme cold events. So it has several benefits, and I think we can probably all get better as we move forward. I mean, ground source does look like a higher initial cost for sure, but as we track through these additional kind of value streams and benefits, I think it'll be important for us to get that analysis better in the future. And so certainly if a pilot, I would certainly encourage, a pilot to include that sort of concept so we can also understand kind of the market barriers and experience and acceptance of a solution like that. So
anything anything you'd like to add in response to what you heard from Commissioner Gilman, Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments of Commissioner Gilman. On the costs with the ground source heat pumps, I think clearly we have a sort of a cost premium when it's the individual an individual home, but I think that there's been some really good evidence that these network systems that are trying to serve, as you mentioned, Commissioner Gilman, multiple loads and larger developments, which is kind of what we're talking about here, that it offers a real reduction across all of those systems when considered together, and not to mention, your avoided infrastructure investment that we've talked about as well. So I think that there's some real good learning opportunities here, and I think that the transferability of skills that you've talked about, Commissioner Gilman, is a really important component. I know that when we did the governor's mansion with a ground source heat pump, I think the governor's wife was complaining about having an oil rig outside of her window. They are very similar.
Yeah, we had a ground horse. I saw a ground source heat pump installed in our neighborhood. It looked like a mining operation. But once it's built, it was seemed normal. So just to be clear, at least my thinking, I'm considering proposing that we increase this budget by a factor and expectations by a factor of 5 to 10. And I'm probably looking to scale back, at least compared to some of the companies' proposals, spending elsewhere, in part to manage to the non-participant rate impacts. So that'll be probably our conversation next Wednesday and maybe continued beyond. But for me, this all-electric new build is really core to managing the balancing between non-participant rate impacts, and how we still move towards these targets. And to me, I'm hoping we can find a way to put more focus here. So unless either of you have anything else, I'd suggest we move on to number 2.
And I'll just mention that when we get to the innovation fund concepts, the company's proposed a project to study opportunities for just what you're talking about with networked geothermal. In fact, they're required, mandated by legislation to provide a proposal by, I think it's September of this year. Okay, we've already covered that. So on to the neighborhood residential retrofit. This project would seek to better understand how to achieve economies of scale in neighborhood recruitment and implementation of energy efficiency and beneficial electrification measures. The project will cover 1 to 200 participating single-family homes and will be compared against a control group of 100 single-family homes. Numerous parties supported this initiative and none opposed it. CREST and PSR support it, but recommend that it be expanded to include at least 100 IQ multifamily units. I can pause here for your for your discussion or provide a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I support this program, and as I mentioned before, I think integrating it with the VPP process that's going on can continue to give us some information around high density electrification and our management capabilities. I tend to think it's not really necessary to locate this within an IQ neighborhood, as it's a demonstration project and not a programmatic offering. Certainly, when it's expanded to a program, I think we'll want to have a component that's IQ, but as a demonstration, I think, it's really important that we identify, the control group and the group of homes that are being retrofitted that actually are going to give us the best information. And I think once we start putting sort of criteria around each of those, it starts to get harder to find those comparison groups. So I'm not that wedded to having some sort of an IQ requirement, but I do support the program.
That makes sense to me, Commissioner Gilman.
And just as a question, Mr. Greenberg, the company hasn't tied this proposed initiative in any way to like the NPAs. I mean, the Pearl Street one's kind of particular set of customers, but to the other NPA, like this could be a strategy that just folds inside of an NPA. Like, should those really be separate efforts? I guess is my question. Or is this something that we should target to happen like in that NPA area more specifically?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't believe there's no explicit linkage that I'm aware of anywhere in the record that the company has provided. I mean, I think what you're saying makes sense. Yeah.
I'm just like, as I look at the Aurora F3, compressor station MPA, which is a capacity problem. We already know the neighborhood, probably in a broad sense, right? Like, it could be more granular, but I guess I'm confused why we wouldn't try to learn in an area we already know we need to cut capacity rather than do an academic exercise somewhere where it might not produce actionable results. So to me, I mean, there's so much duplication, which what I envision would be going on to execute the NPI, where you would be targeting this confined geographic area to really try to implement electrification and DSM to some degree in that area. I'm kind of thinking it's the same thing. That, like, yes, do a neighborhood retrofit electrification project in Aurora to be part of that NPA, because that's like clearly part of what has to happen there.
I really like that. I'm just struggling with whether what the order says to require, strongly encourage, urges. I mean, to me, this is all about managing down capital. That's what we need to be doing if we're going to avoid non-participant rate impact. So I totally agree with you. How strong would you like to go, Commissioner Gelman?
I don't know, because I'm thinking about the IQ component too. I mean, I tend to agree with Commissioner Plant. I'm trying to think, is it exactly the same learnings if you do like a heavy dose IQ in an area versus like more market rate in an area? So it's like, it's hard. I think you impact the transferability of the learnings with each of these like things you put on it. Well, I don't know. I don't know if we solve this exactly today, but to me, those are so, and probably, I think we're going to talk about the MPAs next. So maybe that makes sense. But like, to me, there's so much overlap in what the strategy and thing you're doing is. Just do it as part of the NPA in Aurora, because you have to do that anyway there.
Yeah, I really like that. So strongly encourage language in the order. I mean, to me, this is not about IQ benefits. This is about avoiding capital. So I like hammering the NPA piece of it. I mean, it's not even non-pipeline alternative to me. It's a non-capital investment alternative. Commissioner Plant, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think your point on, maximizing the benefit is, clearly when partnered with an MPA, you're going to maximize the benefit, which I think it should be an objective. My fear, and I think this is why you're trying to figure out how strongly to make the language, is that we end up, if they can't find the homes, for both the control and the demonstration group within the Aurora F3 MPA, then they don't do either one, or they don't, if we kind of firmly tie them together. But I do support the objective, and if we can, use that, I think, Mr. Chairman, what you were suggesting, strongly encourage, or whatever the language might be, ultimately what we would like to do is maximize the benefits, and the maximization of benefits is going to be associated with MPA. It's not all the benefits, but it's a maximization of the benefits. And I think that we should be sort of targeting that.
That makes sense to me. Commissioner Gelman, anything you want to add before we jump to the MPAs?
No, I mean, I think this gets to like, what's the primary use case for electrifying an entire neighborhood? It's to save the cost on the gas infrastructure. I mean, I think you also can probably get much more targeted in outreach, get much more targeted in contractor offerings, and so some of this is to figure some of that out, I would hope, in terms of like what sort of efficiencies can you get when you really kind of attack at a super local level. But it just strikes me like we're already trying to do that. And what I fear is kind of on the flip side of Commissioner Plant's point is like, if we do too many varied initiatives, everybody's real distracted. And if the point of the NPA is to get a heavy dose of electrification right in that neighborhood, paired with DSM. Electrification was not the entirety of the. Maybe that's it, but I recognize there were definitely comments which might be the nail in the coffin to this being the perfect solution. That NPA for Aurora, I believe, included a pretty heavy dose of high efficiency furnaces and things. So it is different, right? But to get to that criticism, and sorry to jump ahead, Mr. Greenberg, but I can't help it.
It's all related. So
To get to
you
that
gotta.
criticism, like if you target see how far you can get locally there with electrification, with a neighborhood retrofit. You know, people don't want them to include the high efficiency furnaces, but we don't know how far they can get if they did a neighborhood electrification project there.
All right, you want to jump in Pearl Street and Aurora?
Yeah,
Mr. Greenberg.
I'll get to that really quickly. I just wanted to mention that I don't think I mentioned the budget for this initiative, the neighborhood retrofit, is $10 million. And that compares to $7.5 million that they proposed for the F3 NPA. So that's a chunk of change, just so you have that in your heads. All right, so then moving on to the NPAs, starting with Pearl Street. This project would explore the feasibility of pursuing a non-pipeline alternative, or NPA, composed of electrification programs to avoid the need for the planned Pearl Street Mall expansion project, which would avoid future gas investment for a specific segment of the company's system. Again, numerous parties supported this initiative and none expressed opposition. CEO and SWE proposed that the Meade to East Longmont NPA and Fort Lupton NPA, which were raised in the company's gas infrastructure proceeding, be approved here. UCA supports this project, but argues that costs should be recovered in a rate case rather than via riders. So the first decision point on this one is, should the project be approved? And if so, should verified savings be included toward clean heat goals? And should costs be recovered via the CHP riders? I can provide a recommendation or pause here for your conversation.
Seems like this one meets the CEO criteria, but Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I agree.
Commissioner Goman.
I also agree. Excited to see this kicking off the MPA work.
I think it's a heavy lift to get everybody, but I'm good with it. It satisfies the CEO criteria in my view. So, Mr. Greenberg.
All right, and another decision point on this project. Well, it's actually not on this project, but since there was a recommendation that those additional non-pipeline alternatives be approved here as well. So that's a decision point for you. Do you want to approve those other NPAs or reject that proposal?
Commissioner Plant.
I'm gonna defer to Commissioner Gilman on this one.
I'm good with that. My life seems better when I do that.
Sorry, Mr. Greenberg, this is for the F3.
So no, this is for the additional two NPAs, the East Meade to Longmont. I'm sorry, Meade to East Longmont and the Fort Lupton NPAs that CEO and SWE proposed be a part of this CHP.
Yeah, I mean, I just frankly don't think there's the record in this CHP to order moving forward with them like under this exact proceeding. But I'm happy to take a second whack at adding wording in the decision to express the urgency of the company continuing to evaluate between GIPs the cost effectiveness and kind of preliminary planning of those MPAs, which they identified in the GIP to be kind of too early to take action on. The worst case scenario here is that they burn too much time and we can't do something that was actually cost effective because the time was wasted. And so while I don't think we have the record to order it here, I would be happy in the decision to reinforce the urgency of them continuing to do those analyses and begin some of the planning and potentially even some implementation as part of kind of that interim GIP process that we'll see, so that we don't end up behind the ball on what could have been done to avoid major expenses with those projects.
Makes sense to me, Commissioner Plant.
Yes, it makes sense.
F3, Mr. Greenberg.
All right. The project would explore the feasibility of pursuing an NPA portfolio to avoid the need for the planned F3 reinforcement capacity expansion project located in Aurora, which would avoid future gas investment for a specific segment of the company's system. This initiative garnered support from numerous parties and opposition from none. SWEEP, CRESS, and PSR support the project, but contend that it should focus exclusively on BE, shell measures, and all-electric new construction, excluding efficient gas-fired appliances. UCA also supports the project, but recommends that its costs be recovered through a rate case rather than via the CHP riders. So the first decision point is, should this project be approved? And if so, should its verified savings be included toward clean heat goals, and should the costs be recovered via riders?
Commissioner Gellman. I'm going to go with you first.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd like to see this, and I might kind of lump this together with some of the issues we saw brought up by interveners and stakeholders regarding the project. You know, there's some concern about the level of gas appliance change out that we see in this NPA. Look, I share that every one of the points is true and is a good one. But I'm also concerned that we let perfect be the enemy of the good on our very first try here. We don't know what the analysis looks like if you just take out all the gas furnaces. I'm worried we might not have a project that can look successful at that point. And so to me, those are very real concerns. I get it. You could be locking a customer in for 15 plus more years on gas. You could, and as a matter of fact, be kind of cannibalizing your own, electrification offerings by offering incentives for this other heating system. At the same time, I tend to think I would prioritize seeing an NPA play out over those kind of dissatisfying features of it, and not trying to go back and correct what was in there. I think we provided some valuable guidance in this skip, but of course this one was introduced before that guidance. So I'd be inclined to not go back and try and modify kind of the measures there, allow there to be some gas appliance replacement. But, maybe in combining this with some, let's give it some thought before Wednesday, maybe in like combining this with number 2, we can get a higher dose of electrification, a lower dose of appliance change out in there. So I guess that's how I'd prioritize it. Is I really want to see us run the course with an NPA, and while not totally satisfied that it has new gas appliances in there, I just don't see trying to retool it at this point, besides maybe see if we can combine it with number 2 and use that to encourage more electrification as a percentage.
Commissioner Plant, you okay with Commissioner Gellman's proposal?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I share some of the, disappointment with that, but I also recognize that, as I think the chairman has pointed out, the Pearl Street Mall NPA requires 100% participation in electrification. And if it doesn't get that, you've lost. And so having an option that, is not at risk of, complete failure, if you don't have 100% electrification, I think having another different component to it, at least, we have a higher chance of moving some of these NPAs along. And I agree with the observations of Commissioner Gellman.
As do I, and I especially like combining two with us. So focusing on this neighborhood with the dollars and the residential retrofit. Mr. Greenberg, you want to keep going?
Yes. All right. Moving on to the Southern Ute Coal Bed Methane Initiative. This project would use horizontal drilling for a shallow coal outcropping on the Southern Ute Reservation. Methane, which would otherwise be emitted to the atmosphere, would be collected, cleaned, and injected into a gas transmission pipeline. CEO supports the project, recommending that resulting emission reductions be conditionally considered part of the approved portfolio, pending a statutory change that would allow coal bed methane to be considered a clean heat resource. and the AQCC's adoption of a recovered methane protocol for it. CEO contends that there is no difference between coal bed methane and coal mine methane. Staff and UCA oppose the project because the resource would not fit within the statutory definition of recovered methane, and so cannot count towards clean heat targets, and so ratepayers should not have to pay for it. Cress and PSR also oppose this project, pointing out that this source would amount to only about 0.1% of the company's gas sales and would cost or could cost 3 times as much as conventional gas, and noting that coal bed methane exploitation in Wyoming caused extensive groundwater contamination. The company responds to opposition to the coal bed methane recovery project by noting that it is not proposing to count the related emissions reductions towards its CHP targets at this time, but would do so if the recovered methane definition is revised so as to encompass this project. The company asks the Commission to indicate its support for such a statutory fix. The company contends that this project will produce real environmental and economic development benefits and is worthwhile to pursue regardless of whether the statute is modified. So the decision point here is, should the Commission support the coal bed methane project? If so, should the Commission grant conditional credit for verified emission reductions and or express support for legislative language to fix the definition of recovered methane as the company requests? And I can pause here for your discussion or proceed to a recommendation.
I mean, I'm okay with the program, but not too keen on making recommendations to the legislature. But Commissioner Plant, where are you coming?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think we should take a position on legislation. I like the CEO approach of, approving a program if the legislation has changed. So I guess that'd be more sort of an authorization, but they couldn't go ahead with the program unless it were this was actually determined to be a clean heat resource by the legislature. And at that point, then it would be, be a qualified resource. And I'll just ask you guys to weigh in here. One of the things that I think is still the big question mark here is, when following the methane protocols that the AQCC has established, what exactly are the costs of doing it? And I think that that's one of the areas that, the CEO's process can help us with, because we do need to make a prudency determination. And I think we would need to know what those costs are prior to being able to make that kind of a determination. So I'm assuming that if the legislative language were to change and this were to become a clean heat resource and it were to be included in the program, that there would be, with CEO's process, there would be a reevaluation to make sure that this is a prudent expenditure. Is that correct?
Mr. Greenberg?
Let's see. So yeah, this is just a demonstration project, right? So the funding is $13.5 million over the course of this CHP, and if the company wanted to move forward with larger volumes, I don't recall anything specific about this in the record. I think any changes to the volumes would probably need to be brought up perhaps via the 60-day process or perhaps at the 2026 check-in.
Did the CEO process, they had the framework, was a component of that framework a 60-90-day process, or was it just, it needs to meet these 4 criteria?
Yeah, that was just, to my recollection, that was just a, characteristics by which emission reductions could be counted toward the goals. I don't know that there was any provisions in there for expansion of a given resource. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering if, one of the CEO framework components is prudent use of ratepayer funds, but we don't know what the cost is relative to the benefit of this program. First of all, it's not a clean heat resource yet. If the legislature changes it, then it would become a clean heat resource. But we also, because it hasn't been evaluated under the methane protocol, we don't know what the cost for, per unit of recovery is. And so it's hard for us to make a determination on prudency, I guess. I don't know. What do you guys, you've been here longer than I have. Maybe you know some way of doing this.
Mr. Greenberg, anything else you'd add before I turn it over to Commissioner Gilman?
Well, again, I think the company originally wasn't proposing, right, that any associated emission reductions be counted towards their targets. This is a demonstration program. This is designed to get a better understanding of what the resource is and what its costs are. I think if if the legislation were changed and the AQCC developed a recovered methane protocol that's relevant for this, then the company would be in a position to include it as a part of the CHP, at least its next CHP. And I suppose it could petition before that if it turned out to be a cost-effective resource. But I don't know that we need to actually address the specific question of what happens if the legislation changes and the company wants to procure a whole lot more than what they've proposed here. I don't know that we need to address that in this decision.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Commissioner Gilman, thoughts?
So Mr. Greenberg, just to make sure I'm clear, there's a lot in this record. There's a lot of projects. I want to make sure I'm clear. So statutorily right now, this can't count as a clean heat resource. People are expressing interest in a statutory change, in which case it could hypothetically go toward the goal. But the ask here is still for money to do the project, essentially whether or not it becomes an official clean heat resource, right?
That's correct. And I don't know if I mentioned, but I think I did. The total budget proposed is $2.7 million per year, or a total of $13.5 million.
All right. So the 2.7 million a year is for a specific quantity of gas. It's basically like a, commodity purchase essentially.
Yeah, and I don't know that the volume of gas is actually specified in the record.
Okay. Do we have any indication if this includes kind of the totality of the, I keep calling it interconnection. I know it's not electric, but like the integration, any processing, any infrastructure to actually get from this site to place you can inject in system?
And I want to take back what I just said. I do think there is some indication of the volume that they would produce. I think that is in the record. I think I misspoke, and that's why Kress pointed out that it would amount to about 0.1% of sales. And then I'm sorry, your question was,
are there integration costs we're not seeing that could just hit us later as a surprise? That the commodity cost wasn't all we would have to pay for to get the gas?
There was a possibility. I think the company indicated that it would also look for customers that might want to actually utilize the resource directly for whatever perhaps process needs in the industry or for heating after it's cleaned up. So, whether it would be pumped into the, included into the LDC or not, I think that is not even clear at this point. So,
Okay.
I mean, they were there's a speculation that they might be able to find a customer that could use it directly.
Okay, but the cost would still be socialized, and I mean, as of now, the environmental attributes are nil. But if there were environmental attributes, those would go to the system at large, even if the actual gas goes to some individual customer there.
Well, I mean, I'd be speculating at this point, but yeah, I mean, I think the company would want to say, hey, we recovered this methane that would otherwise go into the, into the atmosphere. So yeah, I think that would be, they would want to count that. I mean,
Okay.
if legislation change.
And what do we understand about the term that the company would have to, sorry for so many questions on this one, but like I said, there were a lot of these. What do we understand about the term the company would have to or plans to commit to on the purchase? Is the term confined to the 5-year budget they're asking for, or does the term actually run out longer to our understanding?
Okay. I mean, I don't know that we have those specifics, but I can do a quick timeline is, let's see, expected to start operations in early 2024. Well, that was this was what was filed with the original filing. I don't believe I have any. No, I don't have any information on any term of contract.
And somebody else owns it, right? The company doesn't own it. It's just a 5-year power purchase agreement.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right.
Well, gas
the resource
purchase
itself,
agreement.
Yes.
the resource itself is owned by the Ute, the Southern Utes.
So I don't know. I'm generally supportive of the idea. That's what I'll say. I'm a little troubled by the lack of detail here, especially in that I don't immediately understand if I'm signing up for 2.7 million times 5 or 2.7 million times a bigger number. So, and I don't understand if the price might actually be more than that in terms of, are we going to get some CPCN or something rolling later side? Well, now we need to build this new gas infrastructure to actually procure the gas. So I would say I'm interested in the project type. Maybe I could move on some sort of conditional approval with verification of some of those aspects. I'd probably get pretty queasy if the term is much longer than what we're seeing here, or if there are integration costs we're not seeing that are expected to come up later. That would be concerning to me, and that, to Commissioner Plant's point, we're like approving it with no idea what the actual cost is.
And I would point out that I think your same concerns would apply to any coal bed methane, coal mine methane resource as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, anything that's some stretch from the system, I'd like to be sure that any costs we're looking at are actual all-in costs, and there aren't just going to be some surprise costs that come up later, and that we understand the term for which we're committing, given that this is not positioned as one of the lower cost resources. So, yeah, I think like any proposal with regard to these new resources, those would be my concerns. This is our first time, not all this information is in here. So, maybe there's a way we can go forward with some sort of conditional approval on some of those items. But those are kind of my main concerns as we look at it.
Well, your questions have clarified this for me, Commissioner Gilman. I don't think there's a record to approve it without knowing the length of the commitment nor the capital costs of interconnection. So, and it's not a clean heat resource. So I just don't think there's a record basis to approve it. So I think we can express some strong interest in seeing a demonstration project, but we need more on this one. And just following up on your comments about environmental attributes, to me, this is almost like the basis for a voluntary sort of program where customers would agree to pay more to buy something that would otherwise be vented into the atmosphere. I know for me personally, I'd be quite happy to pay more on my gas bill if I knew I had a cleaner molecule. So, that'll tee up the conversation, I think, on the certified natural gas too. So that would be my suggestion. Express interest on seeing recovered, something like this. Find the record inadequate to approve it now, and ask for some additional consideration as part of a voluntary program where we try and monetize the environmental attributes explicitly. So that's sort of what I'm hearing and thinking, Commissioner Plant, and then back to you, Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that approach. I think we're going to talk about the CNG issue here in a little bit, so we can leave that. But in terms of deferring this, I would also add until if and when the legislature added this as a clean heat resource, that would be another thing that I would want to have happen before we were to consider this.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, just to tie this back, and maybe we don't finalize this all exactly today, because I think there's a lot of relationships, and apologies to Mr. Greenberg. I asked some super detailed questions today, and it's a really big record, so we might find more information by next Wednesday. But I wanted to tie this back. We had a recovered methane discussion on Wednesday about using a 60-90 day process. And it was a similar discussion. They're like, okay, conceptually it's there, let's use it, but there's not enough information here to understand what we'd be committing to. And so you could use the 60-90 day process to bring an actual project where we vet the actual, attributes of the project. That could be an avenue for this, potentially, right? Like, we have an actual project identified, which is better than in the recovered methane record. But it needs some work. It needs more information before it's something actionable. So I don't know, maybe between now and Wednesday, we think, like, is there a linkage between this and the framework that we discussed for recovered methane? Where, it sounds like an interesting project. I don't want them to lose the opportunity to participate in it and support this project. So I'd like to show, is there an avenue whereby we could get this information? I think we kind of already laid that out for recovered methane. This might be a little complicated since it's not a clean heat resource by statute, but maybe we just flex that a little and show that this could go in that same process. So just something to think about for Wednesday, where maybe we can show an avenue, but certainly appreciate that there are some concerns with the information that's provided.
Well, I'd also say, like I did on the recovered methane, I'm open to using some ratepayer funds and socializing some of the costs overall customers if we can get the project done, and it can be the basis for a voluntary offering. So I hear you don't want to entirely lose the opportunity, and maybe there's a way to have some funding to get this moving. So Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I'm trying to think through is the only reason this isn't within the recovered methane budget is because it hasn't been approved as a clean heat resource yet, right? So if the legislature were to change the statute and it became, that would make it a clean heat resource and would actually allow it to be considered under the recovered methane. Within the budget. And I think we also, when we discussed recovered methane on Wednesday, we said that any contract period couldn't exceed the net present value that's being budgeted. So I think we maybe addressed at least the budget and contract issue as it relates to recovered methane. My sense is if this were approved, changed, the legislative language were changed, this would become a project that could be considered a clean heat resource and it could be under recovered methane. Maybe that, and then we're gonna also, the earliest change that would happen would be next legislative session. We've talked about having a review, a flex review in 26. If it were changed by then, I mean, that could be another component of the flex period review.
All right, maybe let's keep going, Mr. Greenberg.
All right. Okay, moving on to the Advanced Mobile Leak Detection Initiative. This project would use highly sensitive detection equipment mounted on vehicles to detect methane passing through its path and allow crews to cover more area, allowing leaks to be detected and repaired more quickly. NRDC, Sierra Club, SWEEP, and WRA jointly support this initiative, but recommend that its costs be recovered in a future rate case. CEO, CRES, and PSR support the project generally, but argue it should be conducted in the normal course of business because the company has not shown that the technology proposal fits the definition of recovered methane. Staff opposes this project because it considers it premature to approve such expenditure when the Commission is considering this technology as part of an ongoing rulemaking. Staff and Boulder contend that the Commission should wait to approve this initiative until the Commission and the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration develop the rules on advanced leak detection, because the rulemakings could require the company to undertake advanced leak detection. It argues that cost recovery for this activity should occur through conventional rate recovery. UCA argues that the CHP is not the appropriate platform for this program. UCA encourages the company to continue improving its leak detection system through proposals in the gas infrastructure program, and to provide more concrete information regarding estimated costs and emission reductions in that proceeding. So the decision point here is simply, should this initiative be approved? And I can pause here for your conversation or provide a recommendation.
Well, maybe it's a little premature. Commissioner Plant, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. I think we've got a federal rulemaking, state rulemaking. We've got to get it's being addressed in a variety of other venues, and I agree. I think it's a little premature to put in this proceeding.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I generally agree with that. I think we'll see a lot more clarity come both through this commission's ongoing proceeding as well as through upcoming and ongoing PHMSA activity as well. But certainly I think it's a very interesting area. I'll also point out, I mean, the way that the clean heat statute refers to clean heat resources in terms of recovered methane, and I think I'm wrong. I think it called out pipe leaks specifically in terms of like they must be cost effective recovered methane. So that adds like just an interesting layer, and like, does the use of the technology necessarily mean that you are saving all of that methane from escaping? Does it necessarily mean that it's cost effective and can get in its clean heat resource? So there's a bit of a daisy chain there that would need to happen. But I think it's premature here not to say that the company cannot continue to pursue and look and obviously engage in those different forums. But I think a rate case would be the more appropriate forum for this. It's not clear to me that this is more of a clean heat expense than a regular safety integrity expense to monitor the leakage of the piping.
I agree. You want to keep going, Mr. Greenberg?
Will do. On to advanced certified natural gas. The company proposes procuring certified natural gas, or CNG, from Williams Energy for 1 year through a pilot under its market transformation initiative, and if successful, proposes to purchase additional CNG environmental attributes as part of Vertical 3. The company argues that this project will provide an opportunity to show the emission benefits that can be achieved and verified through the procurement of CNG. The company anticipates that CNG will come with a modest premium compared to conventional natural gas. The company expects that future purchases might incur higher premiums due to its commitment to more robust measurement processes. The company consultant E3 modeled a CNG cost premium range of 5 to 10 cents per MMBTU compared to conventional gas purchases. The company contends that CNG is considered a relatively cost-effective emission reduction tool. Several parties, including staff, CEO, CCD, COSACIA, and SWEEP, note that CNG is not a clean heat resource, and so argue that it should neither be approved here nor recovered through the CHP riders or through the gas cost adjustment mechanism. In their opposition to the CNG, staff, NRDC, Sierra Club, SWEEP, WRA, Crescent, PSR, UCA, and Boulder variously argue that 1, there is no existing baseline at the state or federal level against which to measure emission reduction due to CNG. 2, new state and federal regulations will require significant reduction in fugitive methane leaks, thereby significantly reducing the difference between CNG and minimally compliant gas production in the near future. 3, there is no industry accepted standard defining certification requirements, allowing operators to select their own certifiers with hand-picked certification requirements. 4, there are serious shortcomings with some monitoring equipment as identified by direct field experience, indicating discrepancies between leakage events and operator reporting. 5, that because of the foregoing, the credibility of the entire concept of CNG is severely undermined. 6, that any emission reductions related to CNG are properly accounted for as reductions in the oil and gas sector, rather than credited to Xcel ratepayers or toward the achievement of CHP targets. And 7, that CNG is therefore a distraction from company efforts to use approved clean heat resources to reduce emissions in the distribution or consumption of gas by its customers and achieve its clean heat targets. Furthermore, Boulder points out that Xcel is an investor in a venture capital firm that has invested in a CNG certification company, creating a potential conflict of interest. Boulder also asks the Commission to confirm that CNG will not be eligible for CHP compliance in this or future plans to obviate need for future litigation of the issue. Not surprisingly, these parties will recommend the Commission reject the company proposals concerning the procurement of CNG. For its part, the Colorado Decarbonization Coalition, CDC, contends that CNG will provide robust and granular verification of methane intensity such that a benchmark for emissions reduction can be established and the lowest emission intensity is made a priority. CDC notes that regardless of the CHP portfolio selected, gas consumption will continue for decades, and that CNG can reduce the environmental impact of that consumption, and that CNG is cost-effective, having a projected abatement cost lower than that of even DSM. CDC also notes that unlike the acute criticisms some parties had of Project Canary, no party addressed the rigorous CNG project detailed in CDC testimony. CDC contends that the CNG pilot project would make a material difference in net emissions associated with gas delivered to the company's customers, even if the reductions don't count toward the company's clean heat goals. CDC contends that quote, it would be counter to the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions for the Commission to determine that the enumerated clean heat resources are the only permissible pathway to reducing emissions associated with the distribution of natural gas in Colorado, end quote. Instead, it argues, all concerned members of the public should embrace an all of the above or by any means approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a complement to the enumerated clean heat resources. In its rebuttal testimony, the company notes that all CHP portfolios entail ongoing gas sales, and that CNG is an attempt to reduce the emissions associated with that gas further and faster than required by federal and state regulations. The company argues that all gas produced may eventually comply with very strict leakage requirements, but that this will not be the case within the time frame of this CHP, and that its proposal would harness the market to accelerate emission reduction. The company notes that at $19 per ton, the abatement cost of CNG is lower than that of DSM, BE, and recovered methane. The company states it will monitor and update its purchasing program as regulation evolves, either lowering the allowable methane intensity for the pilot or ceasing to purchase CNG if regulations significantly reduce or eliminate the benefits of CNG. The company contends that its proposed pilot will help ensure transparent verification and avoidance of double counting unless and until a more holistic regime is in place on the regulatory side, and recommends that the Commission approve the CNG pilot stating that it can complement any approved clean heat portfolio, achieve broader and swifter statewide emissions reductions, and push the country forward on meeting its national and international commitments. So the decision point here again is, should the commission approve any budget for CNG? And I can pause here for your discussion or proceed to a recommendation.
So maybe I'll jump in first here and just say, consistent with some of the criticism, I would not view this as a clean heat resource, but I think it might be in terms of finding a middle ground, it might be a useful component of a voluntary program, particularly if it was limited solely to in-state investments. And I might allow a small budget to be approved to get this going. Again, I like the idea of having the opportunity to pay a little more on my gas bill to reduce the environmental impacts of my usage. And, this, may be a Wednesday conversation, but I'm thinking, there's like a product with a small amount of expensive renewable natural gas comprised by a bunch of certified natural gas that the qualities that made it certified were sort of tightly managed in a future process to address as many concerns as we can. But I like exploring these benefits, more through a voluntary program. So I'll stop there, and anywhere you'd like to go, Commissioner Plant, my idea, or certified natural gas in general.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think that, as not it's not a clean heat resource as defined under the statutes, and so should not be a part of this a part of the plan, with the sort of rubric that we've agreed upon for these technologies. I thought that Boulder's testimony from Ms. Copeland was really informational for me, as in terms of how the oil and gas is attempting to meet their greenhouse gas reductions for compliance with the Colorado roadmap. And I think that this may be a really great way for them to do that. That's I think clearly outside of the responsibility of the PSCO ratepayers, but some sort of a voluntary program like what you're suggesting, Mr. Chairman. I think that I could support that. And I don't know, I think there was also, Mr. Greenberg, I think there was also a request for us to make a official determination that this is not a clean heat resource for the purposes of future CHPs, and I would be willing to do that as well.
Can I jump in on that? Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
That the commission has really already addressed the issue and kind of stated that this is not a CNG, this is not a clean heat resource. You discussed that in the fall in the process surrounding the initial the company's initial filing. So it's I think the commission said that CNG could only count towards compliance with clean heat target if the company could demonstrate that it reduced emissions from the distribution and end use of gas. And since the company has, since it's amended its application, is not seeking credit towards its clean heat target, that issue is rather moot at this point.
Yeah, I think that they were asking for a declaratory order, sort of to avoid the need for litigation. And all I'm saying is that out of after we've received all of the testimony that we've received in this case, I would be willing to make that sort of a judgment for future CHPs. That's all.
Commissioner Goman, CNGs in general, whether it's a useful component of a voluntary program, anywhere you'd like to take it?
I'd probably talk to council and advisors before going as far as Commissioner Plant for the future CHP question. I think we were crystal clear in this proceeding And I think I could say we were crystal clear that it was not a close call, that CNG was not an enumerated clean heat resource in this proceeding. So, you know, I think CEO had great point. A lot of folks had great points here, though. There's just a lot going on at AQCC and APCD on future state regulations on especially source emissions of natural gas. But you know, I wasn't clear in going through this proceeding what the baseline would really be. I mean, I'm clear on their proposal that the baseline was the average, but it's an average that apparently no one knows, and is being, you know, better than the worst half good enough. You know, is that exceptional? Is that what we should be promoting, or is there kind of a higher tier of performance that should be verified here? And I was equally unclear as we see like AQCC's Regulation 7 go into effect what that baseline would change to. I mean, my recollection in the hearing was that the baseline would change to just simply what that regulation requires, which you have to be better than that. So, you know, I just failed to see like a meaningful differentiation of how we'll understand that this is really kind of an exceptional level of performance in terms of emissions to be worthy of a cost premium, especially in like a changing market and a changing regulatory environment in terms of what those emissions look like at the source, and a real lack of information about the source emissions of most of these operations. So it feels to me like there is just not good data here to really understand what the environmental benefit is, how it's measured, and how it's verified as we go forward, kind of given the lack of standardization here. So I'm pretty weary, certainly, to spend kind of overall socialized ratepayer funding on this. You know, if it was more of a dedicated program with no non-participant rate impacts and folks could just sign up for it, a little hard to work out, you know, given the term, and people can generally come and go in these voluntary programs. But even still, I think that would be, you know, we would be somewhat endorsing the greenhouse gas emissions that are claimed to be reduced by that, by allowing that voluntary program to be offered to customers. So I'm still trying to figure out if we have enough information to really feel good about, you know, what would be offered to customers, what would be being communicated to customers in terms of an environmental impact that is, I'm not saying it's zero. I think there is environmental impact to making improvements at the source emissions, but the baseline data is so difficult to get to, and there are real challenges with, you know, a lack of standardization here, that it's difficult to understand exactly, you know, how durable the values we'll see really are. So those are just some of my.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. We don't have a record to set up a voluntary program here. The question is there interest, and this may be a Wednesday question, to you know, solicit such a program where it wasn't, you know, maybe where the CNG wasn't above average, but it was, you know, truly exceptional. And we focused on, you know, 2 or 3 certification things that produced the clearest, the best practice, and provided the greatest push to, you know, to clean up that side of the business. I mean, for me, like I say, for me and my neighbors, I think, you know, there was value in being able to purchase wind at a premium 20 years ago. And if I could purchase a cleaner molecule, or, you know, do something to use our collective purchasing, voluntary opt-in purchasing power to clean up and make better that portion of the industry, you know, I'd have interest in that. So anyway, Commissioner Plant.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're I think you're right. I think it's an interesting proposal. I would have additional questions around, you know, what happens with the emission reduction? Is it retired? Is it able to be claimed by the the industry and meeting their roadmap compliance. I don't know. And so I think that, you know, your point, we don't have a record here, but these are some of the questions that I would be
Right,
wondering.
that's not clear what the actual baseline is. So I'm not sure we can go much further. Anything else to add on this, Commissioner Gilman, or should we just keep going?
No, I mean, I generally agree with the premise. Natural gas will be used for some time. I think it's helpful to clean up that part of the industry. I think there are regulations already to do so, and it's unclear like the exact interaction there. And so I think where our role really lies here is understanding, certainly in this proceeding, that's not a clean heat resource. Anything we're either signing up to be offered to or paying from ratepayers would really need some robust data behind what is the actual benefit, why, how will that be communicated. We don't have that here. I'm open to the idea that could develop in the future, especially as some of the ongoing things going on with this play out and this market develops and matures.
All right, why don't we take maybe, I'm thinking, Mr. Greenberg, a 10-minute break. We're already a couple hours into this. Why don't we come back at 11:20 and, you know, we'll go as far as we can today and then reconvene on Wednesday. Commissioner Gilman, did you have something before we take a break?
Yeah, I have something else scheduled afternoon, so I was hoping we have a hard
So,
stop.
well, you want to just, why don't we take a 5-minute break and then we'll end at noon? Does that work?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll come back at 11:15. We'll go as far as we can by noon, and we'll continue on Wednesday. So thanks. See you guys in 5 minutes. All right. Mr. Greenberg, you want to continue?
Yes, but quickly before I do, I heard a lot of skepticism about the CNG proposal. I just want to check in. Is this something you want to bring back Wednesday?
We'll see. I think it's very clear what we want to do on CNG. I think there is a question about whether we want to try and what we want to try and do on a voluntary program.
Okay, and what you want to do on CNG is not include the funding for this initiative in this CHP plan.
I think that's clear.
All right, I will move on to the hydrogen demonstration initiative. Public Service originally proposed a hydrogen blending project on a small group of homes in unincorporated Adams County. The company tabled that proposal in rebuttal, suggesting that it might bring it back at its proposed 2026 check-in. The company also proposed 2 new projects to demonstrate the use of blended hydrogen on rebuttal. The first of these would demonstrate blending at a company facility with no live customers using distribution facilities isolated from the general distribution system. This project would give company employees experience with hydrogen blending and would validate performance of typical consumer appliances like furnaces, water heaters, and stoves. Under the second proposed project, the company would issue an RFI to identify 1 or more commercial customer partners interested in receiving blended hydrogen and fuel stock, presumably as a means to reduce emissions associated with hard to electrify end uses. The company states that sufficient green hydrogen will likely be available by the time these 2 initiatives reach the operational phase, but argues that the small volumes involved in these projects make the color of the hydrogen immaterial. The company suggests that many intervener concerns will be addressed by these 2 projects, and that any residual concerns regarding hydrogen blending in a residential context can be taken up as a part of the proposed 2026 check-in process. The company contends that hydrogen is a potentially important tool in a clean heat future, and some hydrogen blending demonstration project is an important first step to prepare for the possibility of introducing blended hydrogen at scale. It contends that doing nothing with hydrogen at this time risks leaving the company at the starting gate if hydrogen does not develop into an important tool. If hydrogen does develop into an important tool in achieving emissions reductions. The company recommends that the commission approve its revised approach. The city and county of Denver opposes the company's revised proposals in favor of projects that would lessen dependence on gas. NRDC, Sierra Club, SWEEP, and WRA also oppose the company's revised proposals as it would, quote, result in costly use of a fuel with uncertain and limited supply that provides limited greenhouse gas benefits compared to other clean heat resources. As an initial matter, I would note that the company has not withdrawn its original proposal for a residential blending project, but merely postponed it to the 2026 check-in process. I believe I heard on Wednesday that none of you would support including a residential blending project in this CHP, even if it were proposed to begin following the 2026 check-in. So I just wanted to check in and verify that is that in fact the case, and do we have 2 or 3 votes opposing blended hydrogen on a large scale in the within the time frame of this CHP?
I think that's right, Commissioner Plant.
Yes.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah.
I agree as well.
Right. And then the remaining decision point then is whether to approve the company's revised proposal for hydrogen blending. And I can pause here for your conversation or provide a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant.
So yeah, I think as we've discussed, the blending into the distribution system, I would oppose that right now. But I think that there are some, as the company I think discussed in their testimony, some specific, particularly industrial, hard to electrify end uses that we could learn a lot from in terms of how hydrogen might play a role in that kind of emissions reductions. And so I would support pursuing those as a part of a market transformation effort.
Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, there's a customer type issue here, which I'm interested in that, the clean heat statute essentially excludes gas transport customers, which are many of the largest users in the state, comprising a very healthy percentage of the total throughput. Yeah, those probably represent a lot of the most reasonable kind of hydrogen customers, or very intense gaseous use kind of CNI customers. So I'm kind of interested in that interaction, that I want to make sure whoever's paying for a program is somebody who would be the ones benefiting from a program. And so, if we had, say, a rider that does not apply to those transport customers, they might be the ones responding to this, or I don't know if it will be just limited to retail customers, which then inherently might limit kind of the size and scope of a lot of who you see interested in RFIs. So it's just, I guess, to say it's complicated given the statutory exclusion of those customers, yet them being potentially, definitely in higher proportion, those difficult to electrify big type of customers. So I just want to make sure we're tying like who might benefit from a program or who might use a program to who is paying for the program to some degree, as we talk about this like potential demonstration for, say, like a CNI customer, or an RFI to see what CNI customers would be interested in hydrogen. I want to make sure that whoever's paying for that work through this are those types of customers who might actually benefit. Is probably just a first idea. But I think it would be interesting to certainly understand from CNI customers who is interested, what facilities do they think are already compatible. If this is a pure hydrogen product too, I don't know. I'm not sure. Is that the same utility? Is that the same regulated service as a gas utility? Is that something different? So I just keep trying to match up in these demonstration projects. I probably have more questions than answers for you here. I'm really sorry about that today. But, to me, like, my obsession in this place is who's paying and who's potentially going to benefit and who's really purveying these services. It's not immediately clear to me that the company is going to be or has scalability in being a pure hydrogen deliverer to CNI customers. So maybe I'll stop there and hear from you, Chairman. But it's both of my interests is like the linkage between what's really reasonable and who's paying, who's benefiting when we get to these CNI customers who, in quite large part, were essentially excluded from this statute and the potential for clean heat.
I don't have any answers for you. I was going to ask, turn it back to Commissioner Plant to see if there was anything you wanted to add. I mean, all those questions are legitimate. I just don't know how to proceed.
No,
on the uncertainty.
I agree. I mean, this gets at something that I was going to bring up when we have a discussion of SEAMS issues, because I think we have the same issue there, right? And as it relates to, who's paying for the reductions, what entities are, complying with or have a compliance obligation under the state statute, who's covered, who's not covered, even if you're making an emissions reduction, and how do you track that? And so one of the things I was going to propose is that we ask the AQCC and Air Pollution Control Division, and this was related to beneficial electrification, to develop a beneficial electrification protocol so that we could actually create an emissions credit that could then be transferred across these SEAMs that we have, whether it's non-jurisdictional electric utilities that are paying for reductions through BE, for the gas companies that have the obligation to comply with the statute, to the electric companies that are paying for reductions for propane customers that don't have any kind of an obligation. I mean, we're creating an emissions reduction credit. And one of the things that came up in the discussion with Ms. Pickling over this, when I just sort of like threw out a kind of a straw proposal around the seams issue, she pointed out that the real issue is how do you allocate compliance for the gas companies, and how do you compensate the people who have been paying for the gas the reductions that the gas company would then be counting for compliance. And so what I was going to propose, we ask the AQCC and the Air Pollution Control Division to do, is to develop a protocol similar to what they did with the methane protocols, which created the same kind of thing, a methane credit that can be allocated towards compliance with the statutory requirements, but do that for beneficial electrification, so that there is a way to credit the customers who don't have a compliance obligation but are paying for the emissions reductions to the companies that do have a compliance obligation and need those emissions reductions. And so that this may be another area of seams where that same kind of an approach could be applied.
Commissioner Gottman?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking through this in stages, I mean, without a doubt, there's a lot to learn in the C&I space in terms of how responsive they'll be to hydrogen in general, how well suited they think their facilities are for hydrogen in general. So I guess like I'm not opposed to maybe moving forward with an RFI step to determine among C&I customers, do they have interest in emissions reductions? Do they have kind of a diversity of gas appliances that could be used to test this concept? And how, ideally, I mean, I really struggle to see a pilot that would include a version of hydrogen that would increase emissions. So I mean, that's entirely the opposite of what this proceeding's about. So would really want also some way to verify if there is either on-site solar or something that could conceivably be, but then the on-site solar already exists, so is that really additional in terms of offsetting their green hydrogen? Could they put in on-site solar or something that would offset it? But my interest would be primarily in green hydrogen and kind of the ability to enclose their facilities to ensure there is no leakage, tiny molecules. So I don't know how we prove that or see that. I think there could be some value in learning that, but I wouldn't be ready to like move forward with any pilot to support those customers, especially because of these, as Commissioner Plant put, another seams issue between the transport and retail customers. I don't know what flavor these customers would be taking there. So this would kind of necessitate that some pilot would be proposed after that step with all of those details in it to actually understand who's benefiting, who would be paying, what is this? It's not clear to me that this necessarily lumps in with all of the clean heat stuff, because I'm not sure who a rider would apply to would be the right group in terms of causation or cost responsibility for a project to address this sector in particular. So I could see moving forward with an RFI to really test the market and understand from a C&I perspective how people are thinking, how their equipment looks, etc. Anything further than that, I think we'd need an additional filing, because there's a lot of unanswered questions especially about who should bear the cost of a program like that.
So I guess, Mr. Greenberg, does that give you enough to draft or start drafting an order for TPC? That seems like we're pretty clear as where it is as a clean heat resource, but maybe there's an RFI that needs some additional record and thinking. do you have or council, Ms. Dundas, do you have a proposal for the best way forward here?
I have a quick question. I mean, what if the RFI were, required to be issued only to distribution customers? I mean, I think your point, Commissioner Gilman, is certainly valid. But to the degree there are C&I customers that are distribution customers, perhaps that's where the pilot could go.
Yeah, I think that's a way to get around this causer issue. But I wonder if it's really the most valuable pilot and information, right? Like if the vast majority of larger, C&I customers are transport, which I will buy in this discussion as a bit of a generalization on my part, but disproportionately large consumers, rather than small consumers would be using transport services. I just wonder if that's the most useful information. If putting out an RFI and some point test the market and understand like how many customers are out there, who are they? Let's see who we could partner with. That might really unnecessarily limit it, really small. It would do away with one problem but make another problem. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe we think on this for Wednesday and see if we can come up with a better solution. But I don't have a good idea of the universe of how many large retail customers do we have that could even respond to this.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I can't add any information on that. Okay, well, unless Ms. Dundas has anything to add, I think I understand where you three are at.
Okay, why don't you keep going, Mr. Greenberg?
All right. So we're leaving the market transformation initiatives behind and moving on to innovation fund concepts. As I mentioned earlier, the company proposes a $2.5 million per year market innovation fund to develop and execute innovative concepts to drive scale in emissions reduction efforts. The company proposes a set of 8 initial concepts and proposes to use the 60-90-day process to add, modify, or discontinue projects supported by this fund. Commission staff expresses concern about spending ratepayer dollars on pursuits without clear and viable path to contribute to emission reductions and contends that ratepayer funds are best focused on helping the company develop options closer to fruition. Staff therefore recommends that the Commission reject the creation of a market transformation fund and its associated budget. And I'll remind you that the UCA recommends a blanket rejection of the entire MTP market transformation portfolio other than the non-pipeline alternatives. I'll present brief descriptions of the initial 8 concepts proposed to be explored using the fund momentarily, but since staff challenges the fund in its entirety, an initial decision point is, should the Market Innovation Fund budget be rejected? And I can pause here for your conversation or provide a recommendation.
Commissioner Plant?
I would not support rejecting the budget outright as proposed.
Commissioner Gilman?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Plant. I think there is some role here for development of and innovation of new ideas. I think that should certainly consider what's going on in other realms, especially say if there are, national labs or universities or someone doing similar research who might be better suited to do it. Those are all things we should pay attention to. I'll just add the caveat that I added before when we started the MTP, and I think responsive to some of staff's concerns is, especially with this fund, somewhat ambiguous as to exactly how much will be spent on each measure and whatnot. It will be important to have really good objectives and outlines of the actual plan for these projects. So they should have clear objectives and timelines and reporting. Because once again, if we're spending ratepayer money, we should ensure that it produces actual data that we can all receive and understand.
I support Commissioner Gilman's renewed focus on accountability, transparency, and reporting, and assume you do too. Continue to do so, Commissioner Plant. So I think that gives you what you need to keep moving. Mr. Greenberg.
All right. The 8 initial concepts proposed for support from the Innovation Fund are the Community Ground Source Thermal Energy concept, which seeks to conduct site assessments for community or networked ground source thermal loop as a first step towards meeting the requirements of House Bill 23-1252, which requires a company to propose a thermal energy pilot project on or before September 1st of this year. The Strategic Partnership Projects concept would continue to work with customers and communities on innovative projects that reduce emissions with a focus on new infrastructure development. This could include a variety of innovative programs above and beyond current DSM or BE rebate offerings, including electrification programs, efficiency, alternative fuel programs, or resiliency projects that could enable all electric builds. The commercial flue gas capture concept, the company would work with primarily larger commercial customers such as Ball Arena to investigate carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology that would allow for carbon capture on commercial-sized gas appliances, presenting an opportunity to reduce emissions without major disruption to operations or expensive retrofits. The universal weatherization expansion concept explores ways to expand traditional DSM measures to a new level of scale to encourage increased investments in weatherization, both as a standalone energy efficiency measure and as a complement to electrification of space and water heating. The recovered methane coal mine study concept would identify suitable active or inactive coal mines based on criteria such as the available coal mine gas with sufficient methane content that is eligible for recovered methane credits under the state's protocol. The study would further identify ballpark cost parameters for coal mine methane refining, compression, and transportation between coal mines and customers, as well as potential large natural gas customers who may be interested in direct injection of coal mine methane in their thermal heating system. The biomass gasification with biochar concept would help identify a pyrolysis technology that could generate carbon neutral hydrogen and create biochar from forest-free wood waste in an economically feasible manner. The direct air capture for synthetic natural gas production concept would test the ability and costs to produce synthetic natural gas and then deliver into the public service gas grid without any major infrastructure change. And finally, the high quality carbon offsets study concept seeks to significantly build up a Colorado pipeline of carbon offset projects in order to meet the demand for carbon offsets. This study would explore the potential for a pipeline of high quality carbon offsets focusing on land-based project types such as improved forest management and avoided grassland conversions, as well as carbon sequestration projects. Advisors recommend approval of the first 6 of these projects, which would be the ground source thermal energy concept, strategic partnership projects, commercial flue gas capture concept, the universal weatherization expansion, recovered methane coal mine study, and the biomass gasification with biochar study, with any resulting independently verified emissions via clean heat resources eligible to contribute toward the company's clean heat targets and the cost of those projects, providing such verified emission reductions eligible for recovery via the CHP riders. I wanted to put that in front of you just as a potential way of potential efficiency, and would ask for your reaction to that.
Now that we're 4.5 hours or 5 hours into this deliberation, thank you. Commissioner Plant, any thoughts on 6 out of 8? Makes some sense to me.
Yeah, I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman?
Yeah, I think I generally agree. Just real quick on a couple of on the community ground source thermal energy project, I would certainly encourage the company to pursue or to work with communities already looking into this concept. Even I know there are several, and it would be a little ridiculous to start from scratch with a community not like already interested and engaged in this as a concept. So that's just a huge time savings, and I think really greases the wheels in data sharing and getting somewhere with this study. If you're working with folks who are already interested in studying it on their own, which I understand to be the case in several places. So certainly encourage that sort of efficiency to be found with that. I'm good with the strategic partnerships projects. With regard to the commercial flue gas capture concept, just kind of wanted to reiterate my issue from before. If we're talking about the very, very largest gas customers, I out loud wonder if they're retail customers. And so I wonder if that is a clean heat resource if you decrease their end use emission, because that's not the retail end use of gas. So I don't think we're sure, Mr. Greenberg, what exact portion of the budget goes to this, right?
That's correct. We don't have specific budget numbers for any of these.
Yeah, but it just bring about somewhat of the same concern. I'm not opposed to the concept, and I don't know how we kind of police that or go from there, but it doesn't likely help meet the statutory requirement if it's a transport customer, and also may or may not be the customers who are paying in, who would do the project. So like I said, I don't have a scale. I mean, maybe we suggest that this be offered to retail customers and be on RRR if we get better data about how much that does or doesn't restrict it, but just a little worried about where those benefits actually flow. And then I have no issue with your other recommendations there.
So I support your recommendations, Mr. Greenberg. I support putting language in our order flagging that the community ground source thermal energy should be targeted towards communities that are most advanced. And I'd also support putting language in the order asking that as the company implements these programs, they be sensitive to the concern that people paying for the programs should receive the benefits, and it shouldn't be targeted at transport customers. So with those two modifications to Mr. Greenberg's recommendation, are you okay supporting them, Commissioner Plant?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Greenberg, I think we're now on to vertical 3, maybe.
We talked about 6 of the 8. We have about I see 17 minutes left. I'd like to go into the direct air capture and the carbon offsets concept, if that's all right.
Yeah, I think you had 3 votes to not support them. So I think that was part of your recommendation. So I'm not sure you need much more, but go ahead.
Okay, I didn't hear that, so I suppose you're right. But the direct air capture for synthetic natural gas production concept, it's proposed by UCA staff and SWEEP because this fuel would not be a clean heat resource. There's little information about the proposal in the record. Advisors believe this concept would have extremely high carbon abatement costs because both the green hydrogen and the direct air capture of carbon dioxide are very energy intensive and expensive. Moreover, it's not clear why an electric utility should conduct this research, or what it could learn, or a gas utility, or what it could learn that could not be gathered from others' research, as there are companies in the private sector that are attempting to develop this technology. I'll pause here for your...
I think we already voted on this, but Commissioner Plant, would you like to drive a further stake through this, or
Yeah, no, I agree that they're not clean heat resources, and additionally, I think syngas promises to be very expensive. So yeah, I don't support either one of these.
Commissioner Gilman, high quality carbon offsets or direct air capture for synthetic natural gas?
I certainly agree on the direct air capture of synthetic natural gas. Maybe I'll still take Mr. Greenberg's recommendation on the high quality carbon offsets, just so we can be assured that we get the decision right.
All right, Mr. Greenberg, your recommendation was solicited. And I appreciate the concise, incisive discussion you led today. So thank you, sir.
Okay. So yeah, the high quality carbon offset study is opposed by SWEEP and CEO because offsets are not a clean heat resource and could not contribute toward the company's emission reduction goal. Advisors note in addition that it can be quite challenging to prove that a given offset is additive, permanent, and properly quantified. The decision point is whether or not to approve funding for this concept. I'll pause here for your conversation.
Well, why don't we start with you, Commissioner Gilman, since you solicited this.
I agree with Mr. Greenberg.
Oh, that's all you got.
Yeah.
Commissioner Plant.
I also agree.
As do I.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks. That does conclude the section on the market transformation portfolio. And I think I'll turn this back to Mr. Mendelson at this point.
Mr. Mendelson, 15 minutes left.
All right. Perhaps we don't need all of it, but I did want to bring back for your discussion Commissioner Plant's proposal to tie on-bill financing to WAC and or rider recovery. I believe Commissioner Gilman had some thoughts on that and wanted to share it with you. We're not going to take a specific vote on Commissioner Plant's proposal or rider recovery or WAC treatment until Wednesday, but perhaps it's a good opportunity for you to share some initial thoughts.
Commissioner Gilman.
Thanks, Mr. Mendelson. Yeah, I just wanted to get back together and have a dialogue to kind of keep you all thinking before Wednesday again. So I thought of your proposal, processed it. I'm generally thinking a PIM might be a better mechanism, and I wanted to let you know why. I'm living for an overall PIM here, so I hope that happens at some point. Overall greenhouse gas reduction PIM here, just like I've been asking for on the electric side. But more specifically, I think if we go after either rider treatment or WAC or whatever it is, it's a possible avenue. I would get that, but to me, I don't think these are endeavors that the company really wants to voluntarily do. And I'm also not clear, honestly, what the penalty, if anything, there is if the company does not achieve the clean heat target. So if we said, well, you perform poorly and, on-bill finance or whatever it be, and so we're going to take away the rider treatment, I think as I understood, I might be mischaracterizing your proposal. But if that was an outcome, I worry that could backfire, and then we just see like even less trying, maybe, in regard to this, unless there's like a clear benefit and penalty structure, which we could structure symmetrically with a PIM, but maybe not with your proposal. So I wonder if we actually would get worse performance if then the outcome is you remove the rider for something they didn't exactly want to do anyway, potentially. My words, not theirs, sorry. And then you get like maybe even worse performance, and I don't see the carrot or the stick exactly at that point to really compel the greenhouse gas reduction. So I'm just thinking a symmetrical PIM would give us more tools in the toolbox to really incentivize and or penalize achievement, which would rely upon effective working good programs. And you could have more programmatic like details in a PIM rather than just overall. I just worry if we take away all the good side, we might get an outcome we don't like.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I just think messing around with WAC and rider recovery is also potentially fraught from a legal perspective. So I'm struggling a little bit with your approach. But where I don't disagree with you is finding a way for this commission to say, we want you to do this. now. Which I totally agree with you because it's really bad that, and I just I'm reflecting back on your comment about how you were doing this in the 1990s and it's 25 years later and we're still screwing around with pilots. So all that stuff resonates with me. I think my suggestion for consideration more on Wednesday, is just be really detailed and prescriptive about it, sort of like what we did in the DSM context, where we just said, here's what we want you to do. I mean, it's almost like we just got to design the program and order them to do it. I think we specified the interest rate and, it just gave them all kinds of details about what we wanted to see. So maybe that with a PIM and just clarifying that, we really want to see this happen and there will be unspecified consequences if they don't. But I don't know. Lincoln WAC changes. I don't know. So I don't know, Commissioner Plant, thoughts on what you heard?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate this is part of the challenge of this process is that we never get to talk about this stuff until the very end. But no, Commissioner Gilman, I appreciate your concerns and I've thought about that as well as, I don't know how much of the overall objective of CHP the company doesn't want to do. I do share your belief that they really don't want to offer a financing program. And that, stems from the many decades that we've been asking them to do that and that it hasn't happened. And part of my frustration is that what we get to is they bring forward a program, stakeholders have problems with the program, they engage with the stakeholders and they can't come up with an agreed upon solution. And so miraculously, what's the result? We don't have a financing program. And so the result of failure of a stakeholder process is that we have nothing, which is quite frankly the preference that they have to begin with. And I feel like that has happened over and over and over again. And in fact, as you said, Mr. Chairman, we asked them to do this in the DSM proceeding that's going on right now. And I want to take a moment to just give kudos to CEO and Tri-State because they've come out with I think a really great program in their on-bill tariff to on-bill financing program. Uses external financing. It has no requirement for qualification. It applies to everybody. It's got a streamlined enrollment process. It works with contractors. I mean, it's exactly what we've been asking the company to do. And, the company, to their credit, has said, we think this is a really great program and this is what we would like to do, which you say, fantastic, that's great. And then they say, but we only want to do it for IQ customers and we don't want to qualify anybody who's been late with their bill in the last 12 months. So immediately, okay, now the stakeholders have a problem with it. So what happens? You end up in a stakeholder process and what happens at the end of it? Oh, we just couldn't come to an agreement. I mean, it's sort of like Lucy and the football over and over and over again. And that's why I was, not trying to litigate program design in this proceeding, but when the company comes to us and says, we want to have accelerated cost recovery through a rider. My feeling is we could put a requirement on that, yeah, okay, we can give you accelerated cost recovery through a rider for your residential programs to the extent that you provide, this kind of financing package. And then there is actually, if they don't do it, there would be a downside. Right now, there's no downside to not doing it. It's exactly what they've wanted to do all along, is to not do it. So this is what I'm trying to get at, is where are leverage points for us to end up getting to the kind of financing program that we've been asking for so long. And, I'm certainly, welcome other ideas of how we provide that kind of pressure to get the kind of program that we want to see. I was just proposing one thing in response to what the company is asking in terms of preferential financial treatment in the rider.
All right. Well, I think we've heard you loud and clear, and I think all three of us are aligned that this needs to happen sooner rather than later. Perhaps Mr. Mendelson, advisors and staff can over the coming days walk us through our options, including especially Commissioner Plant's proposal. And then if you can also help us with the impacts of various budgets and the rate impacts of that. And we'll see how far we get next Wednesday. And I guess we could also take it up on the 15th if we had to, right? There's no timing deadline, is there?
Oh, we're looking for a 28th decision, 5/28 decision. But we could, if we can get most of remaining issues done next Wednesday, then yeah, if there were a few last minute things, then we could still write the order and around what hasn't been decided.
So I know we got to finish the remaining issues. We got the budget and the rate impacts. We got on-bill financing. Commissioner Plant, Commissioner Gilman, Commissioner Plant, other issues for next week.
Yeah, I think a big one coming up is the seams issue and how we want to allocate costs.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's next on the decision matrix. Commissioner Gilman, anything else before we adjourn in our last couple minutes?
No, nothing before we adjourn today. We got some ground to go still next Wednesday. But this is helpful to get through more of the issues. But yeah, appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Mendelson, anything else before we break today?
No, thank you for your time. And advisors and counsel are working on a work product on these on-bill financing issues specifically, and perhaps some options to work forward.
All right, and if you can figure out how to adapt the company's rate impact model for the rebuttal phase proposals and for what we might want to do in an acceptable way, that would be greatly appreciated for me, Mr. Mendelson.
I'm getting close.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks to the team, advisors, council. Thanks to the both of you. I'm glad. Can we have some fireworks to end on, Commission? Yes. I guess we should have saved it for next Wednesday when we're done. But, good transition to the weekend. So thanks to all. With that, this deliberation meeting is adjourned. Have a great weekend, everybody.